The morning in Nuseirat breaks not with calm, but with mourning. In the heart of central Gaza, the streets are lined with grief. Families move through clouds of dust and smoke, carrying the bodies of those they lost just hours earlier. The air here is heavy, not only with ash, but with disbelief. What was supposed to be a day of quiet under ceasefire has become another chapter of loss. The Civil Defense Agency in Gaza says Israeli airstrikes across the territory on October 19th killed at least 45 people, among them entire families. Hospitals, already overwhelmed, received wave after wave of casualties through the night. Inside the Nuseirat refugee camp, survivors gather beside white shrouds laid in rows. Men whisper prayers, women cry out names that echo through the alleyways. A father kneels beside his daughter's body. A brother clutches the small hand of a child, lifeless in his arms. It is an image that repeats itself over and over across Gaza. Officials say the strikes came without warning, hitting residential areas where displaced families had sought refuge. Most of them, people who had already fled from Gaza City, thinking central Gaza would be safer. Among them was Imad Issa, a man who had been living with his sister's family in Nuseirat after escaping earlier bombardments. He speaks through tears, his voice trembling. Yesterday, we were unexpectedly targeted at our place of displacement. My sister, Issa, was martyred alongside her husband, Mohammad, their children, and my sister's mother-in-law. He pauses, looking down. The crowd around him remains silent, some nodding, others staring blankly at the ground. Imad's words capture a sentiment many here share, a deep confusion and anger that the violence has returned. I don't understand why, despite the ceasefire in Gaza, the war has resumed, he says. By what right does this criminal occupier inhumanely resume this war? Those words echo against the wails of mothers and the chants of men reciting funeral prayers. Nearby, Mohammad Shabir, another displaced resident, describes the brief moment of relief that had come with the announcement of a truce, a moment that vanished overnight. When they announced the truce, she says, we felt a little safer and said, thank God the war is over and God will protect our remaining children. I lost a martyr at the beginning of the war and we were glad the war is over. Let the people live in safety, but there is no security. The war has resumed again. More than 100 martyrs just after the truce and security. Her words mix faith with fatigue, a mother's plea that has become a refrain across the Gaza Strip. The bodies are carried through the narrow streets, wrapped in blankets and plastic sheeting. Men lift them onto makeshift stretchers, sometimes doors, sometimes wooden planks. A small crowd follows, reciting verses from the Quran. Each name called out adds to a list that has already grown far too long. Paramedics from Gaza's civil defense stand nearby, their uniforms still dust-stained from night-long rescue efforts. They speak of homes reduced to rubble, of entire families trapped beneath collapsed roofs. One rescuer says they dug with their hands when the machinery failed. Another recounts finding children side by side in the debris, still clutching each other. Doctors at the Deir al-Balah hospital say the facilities can no longer cope. The morgue is full. Bodies are being placed in refrigerated trucks or temporary tents outside. There is no space left to grieve privately. At the mosque courtyard, funeral prayers begin again. Hundreds stand shoulder to shoulder, facing the same direction, whispering the same plea, mercy. The imam's voice breaks as he prays for the dead and the living alike. Camera lenses capture men pressing their foreheads to the ground, the rhythmic motion of prayer interrupted only by the sound of sobbing. Mothers hold photographs. Fathers hold silence. Children, too young to understand, look on, wide-eyed and afraid. It's hard to tell where one family's grief ends and another's begins. Here in Nuseirat, sorrow is shared like air. Throughout the camp, the scent of smoke and disinfectant lingers. Trucks carrying rubble drive past ambulances still flashing their lights. Volunteers hand out bottles of water to those waiting in line outside makeshift morgues. Everywhere, people ask the same question. If there was a ceasefire, why are there more bodies today than yesterday? International observers have yet to verify the full death toll, but Gaza's health officials say more than 45 people died across multiple districts, Deir al-Balah, Nuseirat, Khan Yunis, in what they call a sudden resumption of Israeli bombardment. Israel's military has not immediately commented on the strikes in Nuseirat, but has previously said operations continue against what it calls terrorist infrastructure in Gaza. For those living here, those explanations mean little. Outside a destroyed building, a boy no older than 10 digs through the rubble, searching for his school books. He finds one torn and covered in dust. He brushes it off and hugs it tightly. In the distance, the sound of explosions fades, replaced by the cries of a funeral procession. Every few meters, another body passes. A neighbor, a cousin, a friend. The community moves together, bound by grief. Men carry the dead toward the cemetery on the edge of the camp. They chant, "There is no God but God." The phrase rises above the ruins, a cry of faith amid devastation. Each burial is quick. There is no time for elaborate farewells, only a handful of soil and whispered prayers. A father presses his hand to the grave of his son and murmurs, "Forgive me." In moments like this, Gaza's wars feel endless, each ceasefire followed by another assault, each promise of peace broken by another strike. Aid groups say the humanitarian situation has reached a new low. Water and power are scarce. Hospitals run on generators and dwindling fuel. Shelters, already crowded, now take in new families displaced overnight. At the Nuseirat school-turned-shelter, mats line every hallway. A woman cradles a baby under a broken window, rocking slowly as she hums. She says she doesn't know where her husband is, only that he was out searching for bread when the bombs fell. Outside, a small group of teenagers huddle around a phone, scrolling through social media videos of the same destruction surrounding them. They are trying to see if their friends are still alive. The ceasefire that began earlier this week, brokered with international mediation, had offered hope. People returned to markets, to mosques, to the simple act of walking without fear, but within days the sound of war returned. First distant, then closer. Officials in Nuseirat say several airstrikes targeted homes near the camp's market area and a school compound. Witnesses claim no warning was given. The destruction spread fast. By nightfall, families were using mobile phone lights to search through the rubble. One man says he found his cousin by following the sound of her phone ringing beneath the debris. At dawn, the dead were counted, among them children who had gone to sleep believing the ceasefire meant safety. The tragedy in Nuseirat is not isolated. Across the Gaza Strip, residents report renewed attacks from Rafah to Jabalia. Each neighborhood tells the same story, the same grief. Back at the hospital, doctors work silently. A nurse closes the eyes of a woman who arrived with no identification, only a gold bracelet on her wrist. Another staff member writes the number 38 on the plastic covering her body, the 38th killed from this district alone. Journalists on the ground say survivors are running out of words. There is anger, but also exhaustion, a deep weariness that no longer believes in announcements of truces or peace. For many, this was supposed to be a turning point, an end to months of violence that left more than 25,000 people dead across Gaza since the war began last year. Instead, the strikes have revived old wounds and created new ones. International calls for restraint grow louder, but on the ground, the sound that dominates is the low, mournful hum of mourning prayers. Back at the cemetery, fresh mounds of earth mark today's losses. A small child places a flower on one of them. She doesn't speak, just stands for a moment, then walks away. The camera pans across the graves, the rubble, the faces, a landscape of endurance and despair. For people like Imad Issa and Mohammad Shabir, the ceasefire no longer carries meaning. To them, peace is not a declaration. It is the absence of sound, the stillness that follows when the sky finally falls silent. As the day ends in Nuseirat, the sun sets behind broken walls. The muezzin's call echoes faintly, joined by the soft cries of families preparing for another night without light or safety. In Gaza, mourning has become a daily ritual. And tonight, as the camp falls into darkness, the question that remains is one that no one here can answer. When will this end?